Hello, our panelists here. Are you able to come up to the stage? Also, another round of applause for those films. I'm feeling inspired. And for Reconnect Rochester. So please, Justin Booth and Dr. Scott MacRae and Karen Rogers and Rochelle Smith come up and join me here on the stage, and we'll have some time for discussion, questions for them, and then also any questions that you have here in the audience. So I'll just, while they're getting here, I'll introduce myself. I'm Seghatoleslami. I'm the afternoon and evening announcer at WXXI Classical and the music coordinator for the Little Cafe. And I am also a cyclist who showed off my bare, very cold red feet in one of the cycle films previously. But now we're here to talk about why we bike, and the reasons came up: saving money, reducing carbon footprint, longer, healthier life. Using a bike can get around can bring personal joy, but it's also for a city or for a society, build community, fight climate change. All these things are another phrase that's come up, I think, from Dr. Scott MacRae, is creating places and environments where people can thrive. So this evening is a chance to get into the specifics, some of what we've seen, what can be done, the data behind it, and this idea of health impacting us as individuals and society as well. So I'm happy to be able to introduce here on, we have Karen Rogers, owner and trainer at Exercise Express, LLC. We have Dr. Scott MacRae, advisor for Reconnect Rochester and community bike advocate. Rochelle Smith, an active transportation communications consultant. And from Buffalo, Justin Booth, executive director of GObike Buffalo. So perhaps having, just seen these films, I was wondering if each of you could answer what resonates most with you from what we saw, the benefits, or what related to part of why you bike, or something perhaps you hadn't even thought in a while and you saw a bit of yourself in that movie. And go ahead, Karen.
I'm just so excited about biking. I mean, this just made me so delighted. I started about 7 years ago getting back on the bike, and to see the transition over several years, for me, it's an opportunity to get healthy, an opportunity to see my community in a different way, and just get people more active, moving. So I'm elated. I'm excited to see everyone biking. This is great.
Yeah, I think that Justin and I have been doing this for a long time. And I think one of the messages that we really need to push out, and I'm a technocrat, so I've missed that message, but I think one of the critical messages is that it's fun. That it's life fulfilling, and it revitalizes people, and it also builds community. You could just sense it in the films. Each one kept building in terms of that. So you can intellectualize about it, but it's the gut feeling, it's that fun feeling that people get, and the vitalization that we get when we're not in a car sitting there. When we're on a bike, it's just that great feeling, and that's what we need to sell more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, I think it's very interesting to hear the comment about being fun, because I think that for so many people in our community, the Rochester community, particularly those who are from historically disadvantaged communities, there's a difference between it being fun and really being life-changing. When you talk about resources and opportunities and the economic impact. What resonated to me the most, though, it was so much, and I took a lot of notes, so you'll see me up here. I'm not texting, I'm looking at my notes for the video. But there was an important, I love what the gentleman said about we're not vacuumists.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when he talked about cyclists and normalizing cycling. But really what stood out to me the most was the gentleman, it was a black brother who talked about when you're on the bike and the difference that it makes in the community. He spoke to the economic impact of that community and what people from those communities actually rely on to make a living, to live and to breathe and to think and to eat. And so for me, that's what resonates the most, because that's what the organization that I co-founded, Rock Freedom Riders, that's what we were about, and that to me was what resonated. So I do think that it is fun, and I've developed a passion, a true interest in cycling because of what was necessary. The last point I'll make about that is that that organization was started at a very timely moment in history where we dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we also dealt with the murder of George Floyd and Daniel Pood right here in Rochester. And so it was so timely to where we were able to really think about those life or death decisions, life or death situations that impacted us as we were cycling. And so I appreciate you saying it was fun, because a lot of our work was pure, hardcore advocacy, and oftentimes I think we left out the fun. But when we gathered and we rode together, we realized how fun it was while we were making the change and making a difference.
Can I just say one thing around that? And that is that when it is fun, but it also is very connected, and it's an equalizer. You know, wherever you're from, when we get together on those rides, it's like a family.
Family,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And Justin, for your experience with GObike Buffalo, or what, as you were watching, obviously you saw Buffalo in there, but also tell us some of what else may have connected you with you that you saw.
Well, first I want to thank Reconnect Rochester for having us here this evening. You called us our organizational crush. You guys have done a phenomenal job here this evening. The videos were incredibly motivational, inspirational. Even some of the videos from Buffalo that obviously I was in and participated in that process and getting them developed and going through the fundraising to make it happen. But it's been a couple of years now since I've even seen some of those videos. So much has changed. And when you get in the trenches every single day, getting yelled at by drivers, or when new bike lanes get in and being, told that you're ruining people's lives because, they have to drive the speed limit now, it gets to you after a while. And so, thank you for the work that you guys have done here tonight, because we need to keep telling the story and inspiring more people to pick up the bike, because it is fun and it makes a difference in our communities.
I have to say, in terms of that, tonight riding over from work, I was thinking of, I'm wearing my dress clothes, I didn't want to change back and forth, it was raining a bit, but a little kid pointed at me, like a baby, and I thought, oh, they must be pointing at something else, and then as I moved, they kept pointing at me, and I waved, and just that moment, so for me, the moment of slowing down and seeing people, also having recently, biking back from a meeting, bumped into people I hadn't seen in over 5 years, and we just talked for 10, 15 minutes. That side for me, I'm often biking because I need to get somewhere, but that need to slow down and then actually see each other is something that really caught my attention in the film as well. But that's almost a bunch of questions, but when I sort of skip ahead, since we mentioned some rides and what it meant to ride in community with people, can you, I think Karen, you're part of this, so can you tell us about the Flower City Feeling Good bike rides that you do with Reconnect and the city's rec department?
Yes, we hosted, this was our second year of doing the Flower City Feel Good community rides with Reconnect Rochester, City of Rochester Recreation Center, and Exercise Express. It was just an opportunity to have a group ride, people from all over the city coming together. We rode on the trails, we canal ride, we did some rides in the street, and just the opportunity to, again, see our community and wave to people, and people look forward to seeing us on Wednesdays in the community. So just a great experience, and we really educated people on how to get to and from different areas in Rochester. You can basically, in Rochester, get anywhere on a bike in about 20 minutes. So it was really educating. I see a lot of the participants here that came in support of us, and we're excited just to have more people riding in the community.
And so the benefits, as we talked about, there's the social health, but there is also physical health, and I think people do worry about if I'm on a bike, something might happen to me, and we're making infrastructure safer as we go. I think Dr. MacRae, you've talked about that in a way there's something that's a risk of not biking, and I was wondering if you could expand on that idea.
Yeah, over the years I've been digging into all this literature a lot, and basically the public health literature, it's a well-concealed thing, but the public health literature basically indicates that the health benefits outweigh the safety risk, anywhere from 7 to 1 to 20 plus to 1, 7 to 1 and 5 to 1 in London, which is not, I biked in London, it's not an easy place to bike. San Francisco, I think it's 7 to 1 and 20 to 1 and other places that are better, and some place like Denmark, it's something like 70 to 1. So it's really profound in terms of that. There's another couple health things I'll just say, and some of you have probably heard this already. One of the most amazing statistic is that there are 40,000 motor vehicle deaths, but there are 2.5 million serious motor vehicle related trauma injuries in the United States per year. 2.5 million. If you multiply that times an average lifetime, 80 years, it's 2.5 per year, times 80 is 200 million Americans will have a serious motor vehicle related trauma injury in the United States. That's 2 in 3 Americans. So it's out of all of us, 2 out of the 3 of us are going to have a serious motor vehicle related injury. One of my ophthalmic techs, who was a young guy, he ran a 414 mile, he was in his 30s. A year and a half ago got rear-ended by a guy with a truck with a recurrent history of rear-ending. He got rear-ended. He had a serious spinal bruise. He has been disabled for the past year and a half. This is a 30-plus year kid that ran a 414 mile when he was in high school. So, there's an elephant in the middle of the living room, and that is the safety issue. And we're all very nervous about riding around cars for good reason. But the health benefits, the other elephant in the middle of the room is that, the health system is actually failing. And it's wonderful to see Independence Health actually step up in Buffalo and support biking and active transportation. I'm a little bit discouraged by the health institutions in this city, MVP, Excellus. We've approached them a number of times about getting additional support, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. And so, hopefully someday, if you are on the board of these companies, we could really use that help. But there's this great opportunity in terms of reducing the risk in terms of safety. Vision Zero, there are 5 countries that are 1/3 the motor vehicle fatality rate: Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Holland. So we can dramatically reduce motor vehicle fatality rates and serious injury rates, not only for bicyclists and pedestrians, but for motorists. And that's the group that would benefit the most from this. So that's my little health and safety issue, but they're so interconnected, and yet we have these silos. We have the Department of Health, and then we have the Department of Safety, and they never really connect. And one of the things that, hopefully with climate change and some of these transitions, that these groups start actually figuring it out and working together to make our lives safer and healthier.
And I've seen some videos on Reconnect site, actually, Dr. Wade Norwood talking about the way that all of this is interconnected as an issue. And Justin, how have you had some of those conversations in Buffalo? How some of that has come together? Or?
In regards to that, safety and health?
Safety and health, and sort of connecting the different things. We've sort of seen all these different benefits in different videos, but in some ways they're different stories about why biking is fun, enjoyable, or desperately needed and important part of our lives. But as I guess Dr. MacRae was just saying, it sort of connects as well.
Yeah, everything is interconnected. I think we can't avoid that. Our land use choices are connected to our transportation choices. Where people live, where people work, how we get around. We can't pull those pieces apart, and why such a large percentage of the population who don't have access to cars struggle to have access to those opportunities, to get to the daily things that they need, to get to jobs, to get to school, to, all the parts that we take for granted for those of us to have the privilege to do so with access to an automobile. And I think that is really an important piece to this, is making sure that we are thinking about a transportation system that connects everybody, that builds our health, that builds our economy, that supports our environment. bicycling can have a tremendous impact upon all these pieces and the decisions that we make every single day. Every time we were just in with the New York State Safe Streets Coalition in Albany, talking to the Assembly Transportation Committee about complete streets, because the current state policy excludes maintenance projects. In the city of Buffalo, our local policy does not exclude maintenance projects. Whenever a city street gets repaved, it's on the city's bike master plan, they will include bicycle facilities on that street. And so with that exclusion, one of the biggest arguments that we hear from communities or from the State Highway Superintendents Association is that this costs more money. Oftentimes, yes, it does, but if we're just adding paint on the street, these things don't need to cost a lot of money. You know, the health statistics, there was a state comptroller's report that was done in 2011 about the cost impact of physical inactivity in New York State. Because a lot of people don't have access to safe places for physical activity. Childhood obesity, 1 in 3 children in New York State are considered overweight and obese, costing the state $327 million annually in direct and indirect medical costs. And when you look at adults, that jumps to $11.8 billion. When we start talking about the impacts of crashes and hospitalizations because of crashes on our streets, that's costing the state over $1 billion annually. And so it's costing us by not putting these measures in place. And we need to make sure that we don't just think about the resources we have to build a certain road and just, we need to think about our budgets and our resources long term. How are we impacting not only the people today in our communities, but how are we also impacting future generations down the road and making sure that we leave our communities in a better place in which we found it.
Rashad, I saw you consulting your notes there, so I was wondering which thing resonated there with something to do with your experience of this as well.
Oh, in my notes?
Yeah.
I jotted you down in my notes. Thanks for recognizing that I wasn't texting. But it was just a really interesting point about within the city's bicycle plan that within that plan, facilities are developed amongst the routes. So I just noted that as something important to me. That's it. But I'm ready for another question.
Well, it's just specifically talking about exercise, then I wanted to bring in Karen though with Exercise Express and what role your program plays and what role that biking plays in the recovery of your clients also.
So absolutely, Exercise Express is a health and wellness agency, and we started out with spinning classes, cycling classes. So actually it was on a dare for me to even get back into biking. A gentleman by the name of Scott Wagner said to me, well, if you come right outside with me, I'll take one of your spin classes. So I said, okay. So next thing I know, I'm in New York City doing the 5-borough ride, 40 miles, and had only been on a bike for a couple of times since childhood. So
Scott was like a bike piper.
Yes,
He got a lot of people biking.
Yes, so huge advocate here in Rochester, but for Exercise Express, it's about getting our community healthier, especially with some of the most impoverished and disenfranchised folks. Many who come from the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and many of the individuals that are riding, they should be riding because they realize now that they could use cycling as a primary means of transportation. So many people are so quick to, think that, once they've made it, they have a car and all that. But, I'm here to let people know that you can make it by just having a bike. A bike will get you access to anywhere, and it's cheaper, as we saw in the video. So Exercise Express really encourages people to get more active, buy bike. We do a lot of community rides. We offer bikes free to the community. We work with our community bikes. So it's an opportunity to teach people that it's okay to be on a bike. And for many people, you should be on a bike. So that's what we do. That's what we do, and that's what we hope to continue to do. And for me as a minority woman, an African American, Caribbean woman. I want to see more people on bikes that look like me. And I want people to see that, you know, if Karen Rogers of Exercise Express can do it, well, wait a minute, maybe I might be able to do this. So we meet people where they are. And it's not just a matter of, you know, what type of bike. There's so many different types of bikes that people can ride: the e-bike, the fat tire, the touring bike, the tricycle, tricycle. So it's important for individuals just to come and be educated and learn what best fits them.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the questions of sort of what looks at how biking can be creating a more just or equitable Rochester. And I think getting people involved in your programs is one way, but I was wondering if the rides that you've done, Rashad, how you found this, because that's sort of a different angle on it. Rather than an exercise group, this is a sort of social group as well.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So, this is sort of my second time publicly stating Rock Freedom Riders longevity between the year 2020 and 2022. And so what I've been focused on now is more so normalizing cycling in Black and brown communities, and doing that through communication forms, media, TV, radio, television. One of the things that I was very proud of during our 2-year ride was that every single ride we had a media presence there, and it was a focus on something that impacted our communities, be it the killing of Daniel Prude in Rochester, or George Floyd, or COVID-19, be it supporting Black and brown businesses in Rochester. Those were some of the things that our ride prioritized. And so for us, not only was it an opportunity to take advantage of all the amazing benefits of cycling, in which some of those things I learned when I started to develop Rock Freedom Riders, but what we were also doing was addressing real issues in real time. We had one ride where we supported a local artist that made a painting, the John Lewis portrait on State Street, and we rode to that location probably about 200 deep, and in real time, in that moment, in less than 5 minutes, we were able to fundraise $1,500 through like Cash Apps and Venmos to the artists who needed the money to continue to make those amazing portraits in the city of Rochester. So we did a lot of real-time rides, real issue rides. Our rides were certainly fun, and we spoke about how rides made it seem like it was family-oriented. We had all of those elements, but for us, what was most important was thinking about the real issues that are impacting lives, like life or death issues in our community, and what we could do, what we could create to be able to address those things. And so I found passion in that, and I found love in that, but I did realize that a part of that work was absolutely publicizing those things that we talked about, the rides, the routes that we went on. We were very strategic in our approach to riding in terms of creating routes that highlighted Black and brown businesses in the city of Rochester. I think maybe our first 2 rides, we had a line outside of Nathaniel Square Convenient Mart, a Black-owned, one of the only Black-owned corner stores in the city of Rochester, lined down the road, where we spent about an hour just supporting this business and raising all of these funds for this business, nothing that they have never seen in 1 hour in terms of the profit. And so we were really intentional about figuring out how to address real issues. The issue was the Black-owned Convenient Mart said, hey, we struggle between these hours for business, and we know that our counterparts, when you think about convenience stores and corner stores in the city of Rochester, typically it's urban communities who dominate that field. And so we wanted to address that issue and to support our Black and brown businesses who touch that. So when you talk about advocacy, we were very intentional about figuring out how to advocate in that right. There was one quote from the film that said, I can't find it now, I got so many notes in here. Oh, when you are on a bike, it makes sense to buy local. And when I heard that quote, I just wrote it down because that's exactly what we were doing, figuring out a way to support those businesses in Rochester who suffered. And remember, this was during the time when COVID-19 was just taking us by storm. And so we knew some of the challenges that these Black and brown businesses face. So in all, we were very intentional about where we rode, what the route that we took, how we rode, and what we wanted to support in that effort.
And Justin, so what are some of the efforts in Buffalo? Do you have some parallel things, or is this something perhaps you're also going to take back to Buffalo in terms of building community connections, supporting business, and also working with communities that are often sometimes left out or pushed out of different spaces?
Yeah, well, I would always say that I never stop learning and listening to what other communities are doing, how they're doing it, how they're being intentional about this work in their neighborhoods, I think is always important. In the city of Buffalo, we have a number of different rides. In the past, we've done Tour de Farm rides, talking about our local food and local food systems and how that impacts our community. We saw a video about the Sky Ride, talking about the impact that, damaging our Olmsted Park and Parkway system and putting in expressways in, and how that has had a negative impact on our health and our communities, has segregated and pushed some of our communities out and away from the rest of the thriving areas in our city. We've consistently working and talking to our neighbors about what they want to see in their neighborhoods. My team is leading an effort right now in the east side of Buffalo on a trail project. There's a number of rail corridors, a creek that's been buried, and the opportunity to create these locations into community spaces that connect people together, connect people to transit more effectively and safely in communities that have not had this investment. What we have seen, and again, my team put together, we've looked at all the traffic crashes that are happening in the city of Buffalo, equalized those crashes on volume on those streets and length of those streets, and found out that the majority of crashes happening in the city of Buffalo are happening primarily in low-income communities of color because of the lack of investment and disinvestment in these neighborhoods over the number of decades. And so we're going into these communities, not asking them to come talk to us, but going to them where they're at, listening to their needs, finding out what are the issues that are facing them and how we can tie these projects, these resources that we're bringing in from foundations, from other places, to make sure that these investments that are being made work for them, support them where they're at, and making sure that they can thrive with these new investments that can happen in these neighborhoods. So we are constantly learning from other cities, what you're doing, how you're working in these issues, and from our neighbors throughout the city of Buffalo. I think one of the most inspirational rides I have been on this past year, I think through the efforts that have been happening, the East Side Bike Club has been formed a number of years ago. George Johnson, who leads the East Side Bike Club, they have a ride every Sunday that starts at the MLK bus and MLK Park in Buffalo's East Side. And he, after the terrorist attack that happened in May in the city of Buffalo, he brought together a unity ride where all the different bike shops, all the different bike groups, we all came together and rode together in unity to the site where this massacre had occurred. It was challenging. George came up to me and gave me a hug. George has been an inspiration and continues to be an inspiration to me in teaching and talking to me about how we can approach these issues in his community, because he said most people in my community don't see people biking. We are changing that. We're getting people on our bikes. Bike lanes, bike paths, bike trails are for us, and by getting more people in our community out on bikes is going to change the way that our community comes together, and this infrastructure is for all of us.
And there was in one of the videos, the flip on the idea, is this gentrifying, which does come up in another video, that there is some inequity when some things are being realized with the cities in terms of amount of biking, but she also talked about just what comes to people last, or that everybody deserves safety and opportunity, which I thought was a particularly noble thing. What are some things, perhaps for any of you, that you are seeing incentives that could be provided, whether it's by community groups or even perhaps by health insurers, if there is such a benefit as people talk about, for individuals, and even in terms of cost saving, is there something that people are looking at? I was wondering if you're thinking, what are some good incentives or what are some barriers that you would like to knock down next in terms of getting people on bikes or making them feel comfortable, safe, and the rest?
I'll definitely respond to that. I employ certified, New York State certified peer coaches that work with people in recovery and work with individuals that have mental health diagnoses. And many of them, because they have lived experience, have had DWIs, DUIs, and cannot get their license back. So Exercise Express has incorporated mileage for our cyclists, our employees who bike to work, that they get the same mileage that you would get if you were driving a vehicle. So it's really important that people understand that you have choices, you have options, and biking is definitely a reasonable choice, and we're gonna treat you just like every other employer that, we could refund mileage for you. I try to encourage my clients as well as my employees to utilize programs like our community bikes, and you sort of pay for what you get. We are really now educating our staff and employees in regards to when you're looking at buying a bike, you don't necessarily want to go to those Walmarts and Targets because those bikes are heavier. They're really for individuals just starting out, but really, an investment in a good bike that's gonna stick around for some time, and you begin to love it and understand the dynamics of how it's put together and all of that. So I really try to encourage people in my circle that you want to get a good bike. You want to get a good bike that's going to last for a while, and you'll be able to grow with it.
Yeah, I love that response, Karen, about what you're doing with the mileage. I think that's great. I think it takes that type of innovation, like really thinking out of the box to figure out how to incentivize people for cycling more. So was the lead consulting, one of the lead consultants on the Rochester Active Transportation Plan with the City of Rochester. Monroe County also has an active transportation plan where we address some of these issues. And I was a consultant on the city's project, but I also sat in on a couple of assignments with the Monroe County's project. And there was a question around what do we do to, I guess it was around incentivizing cycling. And I thought of a few things, and then also out of my work as lead consulting with the ROC Active Transportation Plan, I thought of a few things. But one of the things that I think is necessary is that if we could figure out, especially for the historically disadvantaged communities, how to make sure that a bicycle is provided for free for all people, right? And I think that's critically important, and I think that there are organizations that are addressing some of those things, like Our Community Bikes, doing an amazing job, whether it's free or discounted bikes for the community. So I think that is something when we talk about incentivizing cycling, that we need to figure out how to make sure that we can get bicycles to all people for free. I think the other thing too is, this was a deeper conversation out of a focus group from my work with the Rochester Active Transportation Plan. There was a question that was asked, and there was a response from one of the participants who said, I have an issue with an employer asking me, do you have a reliable source of transportation? And typically we think of motor vehicles as a reliable source of transportation. But I think that it takes some sort of countywide, citywide effort to even incentivize employers to say, if you have cyclists who are cycling to work, then we should think about what is equitable. What does equity mean in that term, right? Do we allow them 10, 15, 20 minutes to get to work on time? Do we make sure that we have the appropriate places to store their bikes? Do we understand what their situations is and why they have to bike? So when we talk about incentivizing biking, I think it is for the individual, for those who want to ride bicycles and have to ride bicycles because maybe they do have a DWI and they can't have another way to get to work, but also thinking about what benefits we can apply to employers and organizations who can take seriously what it means to incentivize biking.
I want to touch on that. I think the employer part is really important. And anyone wants to talk about transportation demand management, Brendan from my team is in the back and he can talk to you all about it. But what our city did, we updated their zoning code. And it's really important that we break down the systems that really favor driving right now and provide at least an equal playing field for all modes. And so what our city did in their zoning code was we got rid of minimal parking requirements for any new building or any change of use in the building, and put in a transportation demand management policy that says that based on the number of trips that are calculated to go to this building, based on the different types of uses in square foot, you need to show a 10 to 20% reduction in those trips, and you need to do it out of the vehicle. And so we got rid of the parking requirements. We've mandated bicycle parking requirements, and we've had to now, all developers have to show a reduction in the total number of trips. And so to do that, everything from a carpool matching program. There was, not too long ago, it cost more to get a Metro pass than it did for your employer to pay for your monthly parking. And so how do we equalize transit and reduce transit and have transit come out pre-tax dollars out of your paycheck to make sure it is cheaper and less expensive and more accessible and convenient to utilize public transit than it is to park a car every day? Because what do we do as humans? We're going to take the easiest route. What about bicycle benefits? There was in the federal tax law up to $250, I believe, you can get as a tax credit. That has bounced back and forth depending on which party is in power in Congress and passing new tax laws. But there are ways that we can develop and change our policies and systems to make sure that we put all modes of transportation on an equal playing field. Because right now, you talk to your human resources department, they can tell you right away how they're going to, pre-tax your parking, but sometimes they have no idea about transit, let alone, where is there a secure bike parking location at the office if you even wanted to consider. And for those of us that get really sweaty when you're riding, is there a shower? Is there a locker room? Is there someplace you can change your clothes? All these basic systems need to be in place in order for this to work. And until we can change the policies and systems that are prohibiting that, it's continuing to be an uphill battle. So I encourage all of you in Rochester, look at your zoning code, look at the policies that are preventing some of these things from happening, and start to make those policy changes work.
And I really like the interplay of the discussion, and I think the film really gets at the individual choices we can make, but also that we exist within systems, and we do tend to take what's easiest or makes sense for us, and so we're changing the systems while we can perhaps push against them on our personal lives as well. Well, I've had so much fun chatting with you up here. I realize I need to now actually allow everyone here to ask some questions as well. So we'll take questions from the audience, perhaps limit to like a minute for your questions so we can get as many people in as possible. So if anyone is interested, there are microphones on either side, and looking forward to hearing questions.
I'll jump right in. Thanks to all the panelists. It's been really interesting hearing your thoughts. My question's for Rashad. I was really glad you mentioned your work with the active transportation plans. I feel like it's a pivotal year in 2022 in the area, given that both the city and the county are writing active transportation plans. Where's it going? And as the plans wrap up, what can we still do to move it in the right direction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that I don't know if I have the answer to. So one of the things that I did a part of the active transport plans is implemented a concept that I created called the neighborhood consultant. And a neighborhood consultant can really work in any area. It is really the people with lived experience. You busy tonight, ain't it? The neighborhood consultant is really people with lived experiences who are able to advocate for themselves about what they need for their communities. And that was the same exact question that came from this group of 12 individuals, a very diverse group of people, though individuals with disabilities, Latin, Black, white, the deaf and hard of hearing community, all of these people actually ask the same question: where do we go from here? And I think we always struggle to answer that question. When you're dealing with systems, right, things can be very complicated to where you know where you are. My job was as a communications consultant was really to work to figure out how to normalize the conversation around cycling in Black and brown communities. But I could never answer that question. However, after deeper thinking and after our data assessments, we do understand that there are some priorities that we're trying to figure out. All right, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize projects that are easy and quick and fast so that we can address culture and community? Or do we think about the long-term goals of infrastructure in Rochester? And I remember our last session with our neighborhood consultants, these folks with lived experiences, they challenged us, rightfully so, and they said, why do we have to choose which is important as opposed to having it both ways? And so I think that's where we are now with figuring out how do we have our cake and eat it too? How do we prioritize those projects that are those short-term projects that might be good for biking culture and getting people to recognize the importance of biking and why we should bike, but also the long-term benefits of cycling. And so I hope to have an exact answer for you in a couple of months. Text me.
Let's say we can follow you on social, and I think staying in touch with Reconnect Rochester really helps because they tend to post updates about when there are times that you can put your feedback into a neighborhood project, what advocacy efforts are happening. I love the cycling map and also the list of rides, which are not just Reconnect rides, but different ones in the community, because I have my groups I know and my friends I ride with, but then it turns out there are a number of other options out there, and it's kind of nice to get to know different group of people, get to ride in a different place as well. So those have all been really helpful ways to kind of keep in touch. I think they handle the advocacy piece well as well. Otherwise, we'll get your number and we'll text you.
Text me.
Do we have another question at the microphone here?
Hey, I'm curious, with all of your experience, being consultants or, working with city governments and infrastructure professionals, are there any, have you been surprised by any, disconnects or the way people, historically just been misinformed about bike infrastructure that you think has contributed to, the lack or just the slowness to adopt this, pretty obviously beneficial way of life for a city? Any surprises?
Every single day. I mean, Rochester gets snow, so does Buffalo. Oh, we can't build bike lanes. No one's going to use these bike lanes. We get snow 6 months out of the year. I still ride a bike every single day. It's actually wonderful to ride your bike in the snow. The fact that it's going to cost more, or we're going to have to plow the bike lanes now. I mean, the excuses are never ending. Or my favorite is in downtown Buffalo, Delaware Avenue was a 4-lane roadway. It was one of our first road diets. We went from 4 lanes to 3 lanes and added bike lanes. There was more than enough capacity on the street to manage the existing traffic. But Channel 2, our WGRZ or NBC affiliate, is right on that roadway, and during a lake effect snowstorm during rush hour, they were out there saying, these bike lanes are causing all this traffic, even though you can't even see the street at all. There was no lane lines because the snow was on the street. So this is a constant battle. Again, more efforts like this to kind of overcome that, get the information out there. But we're battling everywhere. I feel anyone and everyone that drives is a traffic engineer professional. We don't design bridges by Facebook comments, but we certainly do roads. And so these are a lot of cultural things that I think collectively we have to overcome.
I think, in Rochester, dealing with the engineers, the bureaucracy, the bias is towards cars, and that's been a real challenge. The older traffic engineers for the DOT, the county DOT, the state DOT, we constantly encounter this bias that when you do 4-3 conversion, it's going to cause congestion, and we can't do it, even though the statistics basically don't show it. Right now we're in a kind of a discussion in terms of Elmwood and converting that to a 4-3 with bike lanes, and I anticipate we'll get the same kind of pushback. It's the number one requested street that gets changed. Basically, there's something like 12,000 people that are moving along that corridor to the U of R and other places. So it's it's a prime location, but hopefully we can win this battle. We lost that battle on East Avenue going out to Pittsburgh, where we tried to get a bike lane in there, and I think one of the problems is just the sort of the old school traffic engineers for DOT and the state really need to get the message from us that we count too. So keep pushing.
And we have a question over on this side here.
Hello. We are all basically the choir, and you are talking to the choir. However, there's a whole bunch of people who particularly don't wear bright colored clothing. They don't have lights on their bicycle. They ride incorrectly, opposite the flow of traffic. How do we reach those people so that they can reduce the number of possible crashes, and maybe just inform them that there's a proper way? It's very hard to do, but perhaps you have some ideas. By the way, Main Street in Rochester is another one of the strange things about putting bike lanes on.
So I'll jump in here. Education again. If I see someone riding the wrong way, or if I see someone without a helmet, especially a person that looks like me, a person that's from my community, I will stop them and I will say, I'm an LCI. You're supposed to be riding with traffic. You should be hand signaling, all these things. And I had an example of that, and the next time I saw that gentleman on a bike, he was adhering to some of the rules and laws, and he did what I suggested to him. So I think that for some people, it's lack of not knowing. For some people, it's just, if someone would take the time, or I would see more things in the community. This is why I love Jesse at Reconnect Rochester. He's always willing to do a workshop, a group, for agencies, for individuals, for universities. And this is what we have to begin to do. Educate people on the right way to ride. And as LCIs in Rochester, that's our call to action.
I love your response. I love that question. And I'm sort of sitting here stuck in between me as the co-founder of Rock Freedom Riders, we were totally against the rules and breaking the rules to make a point. And many of our riders, including myself, did not ride with a helmet. And it was a concern from many of our cyclists who said, hey, where's your helmet? And I think for me, I just really, it took me back to my childhood. And I remember when helmets first became a thing, when you had to wear them, and what it meant for my community to say, we've been doing this for, we've been riding as kids, riding around the streets, stuffing juice jugs in the back of our tires. We're not putting helmets on. And it wasn't like we were defying the rules, and we absolutely understood the issue around not being safe. But I think you're right, Karen, and you answer it correctly. It's really around education. Even me as an advocate in that space, but feeling sort of comfortable and in my own zone and leave me alone. I think it's really important that education is at the forefront of this movement. I was on my bike rides learning bike signals from folks like Scott Wagner and all of these other folks who were mentioning, who were yelling out those calls and teaching us along the way. and it was absolutely valuable. But I think you're spot on. It requires education, and it requires intentional education. To your point about Jesse, when we Reconnect Rochester, and those types of workshops that we need. We need that. And of course, we need that, and hopefully there's some decision makers and money movers in the audience. That's why Reconnect Rochester need those more resources to be able to, somebody likes that, to be able to actually do that work. So thank you for saying that, Karen.
And just jumping in one more time, it's not okay to be silent. When I went to your rides,
You said it.
I said it. I was one of the people that, look, I'm an LCI. I want you guys to be safe. They're all looking at me like, what? Who is this chick? You know, but
Tell them what an LCI is.
Oh, I'm sorry. League cyclist instructors. So we teach people how to be safe on a bike. We teach people how to check their bike, the ABCs of riding and things of that nature. But, you know, I couldn't just be quiet, and they still did what they wanted to do, but I still explained to them from my experiences, my lived experience, here's what, you know, they say is best practices. So
And just one more point to that, because we talked about this. We had so many in-depth conversations. We had a group of captains, and we had these conversations, and not that this is an excuse, because safety is absolutely critical and important here. But we talked about what we were fighting for, and the fact that Black bodies were being kneed to death in the streets. And so we sort of evaluate that in this very strange way. And maybe it was right to some, maybe it was wrong to others, but we had those deep conversations, and it goes back to that question around really why do we ride, and our reason was for advocacy, and in this strange way, putting our very own safety on the line to make a point. But it was definitely, your name definitely came up in the captain's meeting.
Yes.
Like, who was this chick? It was Karen.
Well, and to the point of we're not, you know, being a cyclist versus the vacuum, as someone who owns a vacuum, that's, I know there's talk about bicycle education just as part of school, like you have driver's education, and that would be amazing if it was universal, because you could be a cyclist or just a person who encounters a bike as a driver. So to have that sort of universal education early on would be really good. I don't know where those sort of movements stand, and I wanted to let you offer your comment, Justin, also as well. You had the mic.
No, you're absolutely right. That's what I was going to go towards. Is like, this isn't their systems failure. You know, we are not teaching. I mean, we talked about all the European countries that do this. Kids can ride their bikes to school once they're like 8 years old, but they have to pass a test in order to do it. They create little mini cities to learn how they can ride in the streets, and then they get their bicycle riding license. We just, Reconnect Rochester, GObike, and the other 100 organizations in New York State, part of the New York State Streets Coalition, we just got the state to pass a policy that says before you get your license, part of that pre-DMV licensing requirement is that you need to understand the rules of the road for pedestrians and cyclists. This just happened in 2022. This is significant legislation, but this is just another part of the systems failure that's in place that favors one mode over all others.
There's a 5-point, Justin, you could probably talk about this, but there's a 5-point movement to get those other laws, basically local control in terms of speed limits, and that's still going through the legislature. So if you can put, you know, if we can.
The Crash Victims' Rights and Safety Act is 8 bills, 3 of which passed both houses of the legislature, 2 of which have been signed by the governor. One is the licensing piece that we just talked about, and the other one is because New York is a home rule state, allows municipalities to reduce their speed limits down to 25 miles an hour for safety reasons. And I would recommend everyone to go just Google Crash Victims' Rights and Safety Act, New York State Streets Coalition, and there's a full list of all those bills. I know, you know, Reconnect Rochester has those as part of their advocacy plank as well. So please, we need more momentum to make sure that our legislature and our governor knows that this is important.
Thank you. And here are some questions here, and then we'll bounce back and forth between the mics. Yep.
All right, so strange question, and I want you to know that you are not preaching to the choir here. I have not been on a bike since I was about 15 years old, and I crashed, and my mom got it on camera. And after that, I was just done, right? So I don't know how I got here, but I do want you to know that I will be purchasing a bike. Because I've done your job. So you're winning. But my question pertains to social capital. So this idea that, and that was what kept coming up for me, this idea that bikes can provide an opportunity for people to have both bridging and bonding experiences with other people. So it introduces people, it connects people, and then also allows for deepening. And I thought some of the ways that you were designing, especially you, and I didn't catch your name, but this idea that you were advocating, you were also providing practical support for artists and business owners in the community just was really brilliant while also doing these other pieces. And so my question is for the panel, what ways are you designing for that? And what are the things that you're dreaming about that haven't been actualized or manifested yet?
Yeah, I think for me, thank you for that question and thank you for the compliment. I'm Rashad, by the way.
Shot.
If you all listen to Evan Dawson, you know the joke.
He's also known by Rashid.
But I think it's an amazing question. I think for me, in terms of social capital, it is really about centering, again, what makes biking normal, normalizing biking. And so for me, I've stepped back from organizing rides and really focus on the communication aspects of getting this information out and getting the input from the community to figure out what exactly it is that folks need. So I center sharing those messages, but really getting the input from the community to understand the actions that need to be taken. So I think that's a very minimal response to your question, but that's what I've been centering now, figuring out how to get the people from my community to have a voice in this and to be able to have that voice, and that voice is publicized, that voice is put out there to the decision makers, to the money movers, to the mass media, so that we can normalize the culture of biking. That's a very minimum answer. Hopefully the panelists can back me up here with their question, but that's what I have, and that's what I've centered, and that's what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, I think the foundation to any social change is building relationships. If we don't have relationships, we don't know our neighbors, we can't get anything done. You know, building relationships with our public officials. And every city that I've seen that's been successful in this is the three-legged stool. You have your grassroots community, the people in this room here tonight, the Reconnect Rochesters, doing the day-to-day grunt work to make this happen, building the culture, building those connections, advocating for those changes. You have your business community supporting those efforts and empowering groups. You know, for us here in Buffalo, you know, we have our health insurer, Independent Health, that really stepped up in a really big way to make that happen. And when we first formed our organization, the CEO of Independent Health brought on 6 of his CEO friends onto our board of directors, because that was going to help spread the word and make sure that that conversation is happening. That's what opened the door for us into our mayor's office. And that third leg is, of course, your public officials. And when you have all 3 legs of that stool working together with the same mission and supporting each other, that's when you see that significant change begin to really happen.
Yeah, you know, I'm envious of what Buffalo got with the Independence Health. But ESL really stepped up and, you know, has been supporting Reconnect Rochester in a big way. So, you know, my hat's off to them. Hopefully we can get the health insurers, you know, Excelis and MVP to start actually realizing that this is about health instead of just pushing pills and doing surgery, basically, and paying for surgical bills. We can put 60 to 70% of all the diseases that we're dealing with in medicine are lifestyle choice or changes. And the more we can get people moving, and the more we can get people eating right, you'll see a big big transition in terms of the way that we deal with each other, basically. So.
And then we have another question here on this side, the opposite side now.
Yes, as an older bike rider, segueing from what you just said, I'm spending more and more time with doctors. In the last in each of the last couple of weeks, I had an appointment with a U of R specialist in Brighton, off Elmwood and off South Clinton Avenue, in relatively newish facilities. And neither one of these buildings that I went to in the last couple of weeks had any place to put my bike. Not at all. I mean, in one case, I actually had to wheel my bike into the lobby and lock it to a piece of furniture. You know, what's going on now? Are there any laws about parking, about bicycle infrastructure, specifically bike racks?
Yeah, I can speak, I've been involved with this a lot in terms of dealing with the U of R, and also I know Rochester Regional is trying, both of these institutions are finally starting to encourage their employees to make lifestyle changes, because it basically affects their bottom line.
And then they don't back them up.
Is great for retention, but in the CEO of Strong Health, basically Dr. Traubman, gave us a talk on last Friday to our department, actually, and I stuck it to him again, and they realize now that they're going to have to start actually trying to promote health. Instead of pushing pills and
Well, I'll be.
paying for surgery. So it's a transformation, and it's going to be a long slog. These are big aircraft carriers that are hard to change in terms of their direction. But tell them, or write a letter to the head of to Mark Traubman, the CEO of Strong, and saying, look, here I am, I'm trying to be healthy, and you don't have any bike racks, and what are you doing to encourage your employees and your patients to move, to be more active, so that you can prevent these diseases?
Are there any state regulations about this?
No, there aren't there's best practice on where they should be positioned on the street to make sure there aren't, impeding pedestrian traffic, so they're not too close to the curb, so you can open your car door. But this goes back to what I talked about before. It goes back to your zoning code. A little story on GObike. One of the very first things that we ever did is start a bike parking program. Not sure how we're going to fund it. We got inspiration from New Belgium Beer Company. They have Fat Tire beer. And so we had a local brewery, Flying Bison. You saw in one of the videos, the owner, Jim Herzog. We went to Tim and said, hey, would you be willing to develop a beer for us that we could use to fundraise to install bike racks at businesses? And he said, absolutely. So we came up with the brand, Rusty Chain Beer. For every for every keg of beer sold, we got $5. And in the first year, we raised $10,000. It was the easiest way for us to raise money, because every time someone had a beer, they're like, we're doing this for you guys. But it allowed us to purchase a first round of bike racks. And we did this intentionally with the city's public works department and with the mayor's office, and said, hey, other cities are putting out this bike parking program. The city had begun to taking out the meters and putting the pay display systems, and so there's already some public pushback on where we're going to park our bikes if there aren't meters on the street anymore. And so we went to the mayor's office and said, hey, let's put out a program, a form, let businesses self-select if they want to have a bike rack in front of their business. We have some money to contribute to this. The city chipped in some money. Our first round of bike racks, we did a grand press event with the mayor. We installed 25 bike racks. The city, though, got 400 requests. There was a latent demand out there. They had no idea it was there. And because they put out this form, and of course the mayor did the press event on it, their feet were then held to the fire, and they had to then pony up $30,000 to then install those other 400 bike racks. And so, it built momentum to kind of get that process going. We then were able to leverage that to tie, the city at the time had, minimum parking requirements in our zoning code, and we tied bicycle parking requirements in there. So for every 20 car spaces for a new building, they had to pull out 5% or one spot to install bike parking. And so now every new development, a private developer has to now install bike parking. And now since we've done our green code, now they don't have to do any car parking, as mentioned before, but are required to do bicycle parking, both short-term, racks outside, but long-term, and in some cases, showers, if it's an employment center or for businesses. And so this is what system change means. Changing the policies and the way your city does business is how you start getting these pieces done and institutionalize it into the process. So it's no longer a fight to install bike racks. They automatically come. And when you write the standard form, we have our logo on every single bike rack that the city produces.
I love listening to Justin on this stuff. So if you're a cyclist, your pockets are being picked by the motorists, basically. The cost of parking in the United States on an annual basis is $600 billion. It's all quiet. It's all hidden. When you ride your bike over to Target and you buy a shirt or whatever, those parking lots that are there, you're basically subsidizing that parking lot. The person that drives there and buys that same shirt, you're subsidizing it because you're paying for that parking space, and it's worth $600 billion, which is basically the same budget that our U.S. Defense Department does. So there's all these hidden costs with parking that are basically subsidized that we know nothing about. So being more aware of this and what the hidden costs of the way that we designed our transportation system is really helpful.
And
I was just going to add, if you really want to get wonky into parking and the hidden cost, The High Cost of Free Parking by Donald Shoup is a fabulous book.
Got it.
So I think they're gonna get a hook and pull me off stage soon, so I wanna get a speed round for our last few questions, and perhaps this just means there's more things to discuss and more things even for us to think about and how we can work together and make happen. So Laura, you have a question there?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that these are all like community game changers. They are setting the world on fire. I've ridden with most of these people in the community, and I think it's really important to talk about, Scott, you've mentioned it a couple times, about insurance companies and putting into the pot, like how are we gonna get them to fund these bike lanes, all these things. I think it should be why we bike, walk, and bus, because all of it relates to each other. Like I biked from my office today to the bus stop and took the bus here to then bike here tonight, right? It's a rainy night, it's cold. It was a multimodal night. I needed that, right? I didn't want to show up and volunteer as a wet rat, okay? And so all of it relates, but I think it's really important. I've worked with insurance companies. I've been a clinical healthcare worker. These insurance companies, unfortunately, aren't very direct in our communities. That's just the bottom line. But if we look at our employers, so in the past 2 years, I've worked at 2 different employers, Jewish Home of Rochester and now U of R. Jewish Home of Rochester actually helps fund a bus route that drops me off in the very front of the building. That's pretty huge. My car was stolen for 2 months. I was without a car. I could take the 12, a 7-minute walk from my house, and take it to the front of the Jewish home for 2 months without a car. U of R funds my annual bus pass to work there. Do not need to pay for parking. I don't have to navigate the construction that's going on Elmwood or Highland Ave. And so I think what needs to really happen is these companies of Rochester, who are our main employers? Who do we need to talk to who can fund, especially healthcare workers? We do not pay healthcare workers enough to own an individual car. So how can we fund bus routes? How can we make it so that our healthcare workers can wake up in the morning and decide, this is true freedom. Maybe I'm gonna walk today. Maybe I'm gonna bike today. Maybe I'll take the bus today. That's my day every morning. I think about when I wake up, I'm like, I guess I could bike today. Oh, it's not super great today, so I'm gonna bus today. You know, oh, it's a beautiful day, I'm gonna walk today. You know, I think about my time and I think about the energy that I have. And we need to talk about the companies that are employing us, that want us to be there because we fund their bottom line, we make their profit. And so how are we going to incentivize them to get us there?
Great
Well
comment.
said.
I
Well
think it's,
said, Lord.
yeah, I think it's a great comment, and I think it speaks to our point about incentivizing the cycle.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that. And that's probably the start of a whole nother conversation, so.
Employers,
Yeah.
they want to retain that, the U of R is like really interested. Actually, Trotman, when I asked him that question, he said, we want to retain people. So these programs that, start making their workplace more attractive, like, free bus passes, good biking facilities, promotional lifestyle change, health, those are all really attractive to smart companies. So we just need to get that message out.
And I don't want to cut off from any of the other questions that you've been waiting so patiently, but I think they're going to kick us out of the theater. Do you have one quick question or something we could take to think about for future questions? Really quickly, both of you.
Yes, mine's a quick one. Thank you, Mary, Reconnect Rochester team. I'm a part of the GObike team. We came for inspiration tonight, and what I wanted to ask each of you was what's something that you're looking forward to? My team should be taking notes. And anyone else that you'd want to give shout outs to that we should be following, that we should know and learn from.
So do we have time for just quick shout outs as we go down the road, and then we're going to hear from Reconnect to wrap things up. And if there's someone else who is standing from the microphone, do you want to quickly ask your question so we at least have it in our mind as we leave?
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but I heard education, I heard infrastructure, I heard big businesses. Last year, the school district was almost delayed in its start. Why? Because they didn't have transportation for students. Karen came in with Exercise Express and helped school number 10, school number 17, and school number 22. 3 of the poorest schools in the district with the highest obesity rates at that. The city school district sent money, asked for money from the federal government, and they asked from the state to pay for transportation. That money goes to RTS because grades 7 through 12 have to take RTS. Why are we not? The money that we get from the federal government or from the state, why aren't we taking it and buy bikes for students so that they can ride? And also put in bike rides at Shamrock High School and some of the other high schools, Wilson High School. None of those high schools have enough bike racks anyway.
Yeah.
Why are we taking federal dollars to give it to RTS instead of giving it to students and families so they can actually ride, help the obesity rate, and then build better communities?
Yeah. I'll quickly respond. I'll say I think that's the answer to that question,
Yes.
what I look forward to. And I'll also say I can't wait till you check out the data assessment from the Rochester Transportation Plan, which addresses some of those issues around RTS and federal funding, etc. But that's what I look forward to. Solutions like that, education, as well as prioritizing the communities that need bicycles to actually live, to breathe, to live, to eat. That's it for me.
In Holland, the childhood obesity rate is 5 times lower than the United States. When you Google Holland or school bus, you know what you get? You get Holland, New York, you get Holland, Michigan, but you don't get Holland, because there are no school buses. Those kids ride to school, and the obesity rates are dramatically lower, 5 times lower.
And I'll just add, the School Safety Zone Act is the area around schools, according to the Department of Education law, that is not safe for kids to walk to school. I have done assessments around schools where I have literally watched a family stand across the street from the school, a bus pick up the kid, and then turn a left into the parking lot.
Yes.
And we tried to get legislation passed years ago that at least allowed communities to take that money and fix the infrastructure
Right.
to make it safe, and so that you can have one-time cost as opposed to an annual recurring cost to keep on busing our kids. And these are, again, the system challenges that we are still fighting against.
But in the city school district, it is a requirement that students in grades 7 through 12 take RTS. There's no yellow bus for grades 7 through 12. So instead of paying RTS that money, why don't we buy them bikes? Or at least get them bikes to, for half of the year to bike instead of paying RTS.
Absolutely. And we gotta push for it. Good comment, Liz.
All right, wow, so much energy, so many ideas. We have a lot more work to do, don't we? Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Thanks to Mona. Thank you to all our panelists. This was an incredibly rich conversation, I thought, tonight. Karen, Scott, Rashad, Justin, thank you. Round of applause, please, for our panelists. Thank you all for coming to be a part of it. Thanks, Dad, for being here with me, like you've been my whole life.
You should be very proud of your daughter. She's doing a great job.
I'm just bringing it back around. And I just want to quickly recognize the hard-working staff at Reconnect Rochester for all the work that they put in, especially Jesse and Monica for bringing you that inspiring collection of films. Everyone here tonight gets a $20 free ride credit to try out Hopper bikes, e-bikes and e-scooters. So you'll find the promo code for that in your program booklet if you didn't notice that. And just be sure to load that up in your Hopper app before the end of October probably, and then it'll be there for you to use next season if you don't have a chance before the end of October. And you can stop by the Hopper table to thank Jasmine on the way out for that. Please help us improve Rochester Street Films by filling out the survey, sharing your thoughts and comments about the conversation tonight. You can do it the old-fashioned way with paper and pencil, and we have pencils if you need one. Or you can follow the link in the program booklet to link to that online. Final thanks to the Community Foundation, Senator Sam Rabouk, and all of our sponsors. Have a great night, everyone. Get home safe, and we'll see you in 2023 for the next edition of Rochester Street Films.